Hi everyone, my name's Anna McLoughlin and I work in the communications team for New Zealand Doctors Speaking Out with Science. I have with me today Dr. David Speicher, who is a distinguished molecular virologist with extensive research in saliva diagnostics, oral cancers, STDs, and COVID-19 vaccine safety, which has had studies conducted in Australia, India, Kenya, Cambodia, and Canada at institutions such as the McMaster University, St. Joseph's Healthcare in Hamilton, and the University of Guelph. During the pandemic, he directed labs and research and development at Multiplex Genomics, a COVID-19 PCR testing facility, while critiquing the early government responses. His peer-reviewed studies exposed adulteration in Pfizer and Moderna vaccines, including plasmid DNA levels and the SV40 promoter enhancer, drawing global attention in the US Senate and the European Parliament. This has influenced Florida Surgeon General Dr. Joseph Lapado's vaccine halt call, the Port Hedland motion in Australia to ban them, and the David Declaration. It also has inspired initiatives such as the North Group in Europe and Call2Halt19 in Canada. Despite a severe stutter, Dr. David Speicher advocates steadfastly for scientific truth and shaping global vaccine safety discourse. So it's wonderful to have you here, David. And it
Anna,
seems to me that you smelled a rat from the start. Is that correct?
yeah, early on, like 20 in March, that things just weren't right, and so as a scientist, I make careful observations, and I ask difficult questions, and I learned very quick. You ask the difficult things of why our government is doing certain things like lockdowns, masks, and things, and if this virus is so bad, why is our borders not shut? I learned very quick that I would be sidelined and out of a job, and so I lost my first job in the pandemic was March 17th. So I knew early on, and at that time, we as a whole had no idea that scientists were being silenced and sidelined. And so it was at that time I learned that things aren't exactly as they appear. Is being pushed as a bigger problem than it actually is, and there was a reason for it, and that's to push vaccine mandates, lockdown, censor, and to launch a new mRNA platform on society as a whole. And so as a scientist, I'm about facts, data, what's actually going on without covering things up, and so I lost 5 jobs in the pandemic because I ran a PCR testing lab after my master fired me, and there I love PCR work, the lab work, except I like things done right without mixed up of samples and things, and their lab flow wasn't right, and so I questioned things, and they were more concerned about making cash than following how things were. So I was out of that job, and then it was when I was let go from a teaching position of May of 23 that I was asked the next month to confirm the great work of Kevin McKernan, who looked at Pfizer vials and found that they were rife with DNA and SV40 sequence.
So can we just go back for just a second
Go
here?
for it.
Because you mentioned a little while back about the virus not being quite what it seemed. And I mean, you're the go-to guy for viruses,
Yeah.
really. That's your area of absolute expertise. What were you seeing that was potentially different from what was being presented in the media and also through our governments and those horrific updates that we received each day?
So we knew early on, I'd say March of 20, that SARS-CoV-2, the virus which causes COVID-19, that thus then a 2% case fatality rate. SARS-1 in 2003 was about 10%. MERS is about 30%. And so it really wasn't as deadly as people let on. And in the first 4 to 6 months, I'm like, if this is such a deadly virus, where are all of the sick and dead people? I'm like, sure, if you're old and there's a big risk, except it killed less than 2%.
That's pretty astounding when they were sitting here saying, in New Zealand particularly, tens of thousands of New Zealanders are going to die.
Right.
You may kill someone in your family or in your close circle of friends if you don't obey the rules. And they used fear as such a horrific narrative and for something that had a pretty low fatality rate, and that fatality rate was that was above the average lifespan of a New Zealander. And so what they were saying down in New Zealand is that we're potentially looking at the equivalent loss of life such as World War One. Well, what actually was the case was that in World War One, they were young men, they were young people, had their lives ahead of them. But the potential that they were looking at was for over 88 years old. So there's a huge discrepancy there, and they used fear to control and manipulate. And as you were saying before, basically to set up these vaccine mandates.
Yeah, and it's seemed weird as well that the first thing shut was the local church. Okay, it's the first time the church shut in the history of the church. If we look at old pandemics, the first people in to help out and care for people were church folk. And I wrote up a pandemic then for the church on March 8th of 20, and I gave it to our local church, and they said, "What's this for? There's no big deal." And the church was shut 4 days later. Like, yeah,
Certainly, that's astounding. That's usually the first place people would go to for sanctuary, but that was banned.
right?
So
It's
you
like,
can see that
what?
there was obviously something else going on.
Exactly.
Yeah. So we want to go back to your study here because your study was discussing the quantification of residual plasmid DNA and the
Yeah.
SV40 promoter enhancer sequence in the Pfizer and biotech and Moderna modRNA COVID-19 vaccines. So I was wondering if you can please explain to everybody what the quantification of residual plasmid DNA and the SV40 promoter enhancer sequences are in these injections.
Well, that's a big current hot thing, and this work is now peer reviewed on PubMed, and it's out, and I nickname it the hammer. And it's because it's such a powerful piece, and it's been on the it's been in ASIP and discussed big. It basically exposes scientific fraud by both Moderna and Pfizer, and so if we go back, all of our government messaging has been, these are safe and effective vaccines, remain at the site of injection. mRNA, it's not bioactive, it's not bioengineered, it won't enter our nucleus of our cells, and that they say, oh, these are vaccines and not gene therapy, and the entire government messaging around these shots has been completely false.
Wow, that's pretty profound.
So if we look first at Pfizer. In the trials, they use something called process 1. It's just a simple spike DNA piece that's a piece of CR amplified up. And at first, it's a DNA backbone to make RNA, okay? To make RNA. So this is an expensive, slow, time-consuming thing, except it's a very clean way to mRNA. Now, once the trials were done, Pfizer switched over to a synthetic, man-made plasmid DNA round ring out of Pfizer's Department of Gene Therapy, and it's a gene therapy plasmid, and it's because it will amplify up and multiply in both bacterial cells and mammalian cells because of a SV40 or a motor enhancer sequence on that plasmid, in which Pfizer did not disclose to FDA, Health Canada, EMA, or Australia's T.
When they were advising the government,
Yep.
You've found evidence. You've obviously got the data from process 1 and process 2 trials, or maybe just process 1 production from the trial. Or was it in process 2 that it changed? And you have evidence of that. Pfizer lied to governments.
Yes.
That's phenomenal.
All of the then they're called trial work is all on process 1, and then Pfizer did a test on 250 patients or participants with process 2, and that's it. When they applied for EUA, emergency use authorization.
So that you were given about a year ago, you were given some Australian vials after these contracts were signed, or was this 2 years ago?
I first worked on Canadian vials in 23, and I did the Australian vials in 24. And so I was sent 3 of those, and those were worse in terms of load than I saw here in the vials from Canada.
So they had it was a stronger dose for the Australians. That's
right.
That's shocking. So your study shows the evidence of Pfizer directly lying to the Australian government or whatever government they were basically setting up a contract with at the time.
Yes, and so in our work here, looked at 32 vials, 10 Pfizer two and looked at these with both tree and and that examines the total DNA in that sample, and so all of it, irrespective of size. PCR looks for a specific short sequence on that plasmid, and we looked for three sites: spike, origin of replication, and the SV40 motor enhancer sequence. And so that allows us to kind of work out how much is there in total if it was intact. And all of the Pfizers have a SV40 sequence, except all of the Modernas have a much higher load of the DNA, and it's a much smaller size.
Can we just talk about the SV40
Sure.
for just a moment? Because people are aware of the DNA contamination, which we will get into later. But can you explain the significance of the SV40 in the Pfizer injections and the potential implications that has for the health of the person receiving this vaccine?
Sure. So first is that all of these DNA pieces and the SVV40 sequences are inside a lipid nanoparticle transfected directly into our cells. And this occurs not at the site of injection, it occurs throughout the body. And it's been known since 1999. If you take 3 to 10 DNA fragments with a 72 base pair SVV40 and the answer on it, and put it inside a non-dividing cell which has an intact nuclear envelope, which is around the nucleus as a wall. That piece can and will go across the wall into the nucleus and integrate into the genome of that cell. And it's been known since 1999, and Pfizer knew this and used this against us. At the same time, the SVV40 promoter sequence will bind to the cell's P53 gene and make the cell cancerous. And now we are seeing a bunch of vaxxed people all of a sudden developing cancer.
Well, we keep hearing the phrase correlation doesn't equal causation, but the timing of the increases of the illnesses that we're seeing work out that they seemed to start from 2021 onwards. So the immune system are being affected.
And at the same time, if you know that something could do something like this, why is it being mandated, people?
Well, I guess if governments weren't telling the truth, perhaps they have some plausible deniability, but you kind of can't really say that when they forced this on the people. and the people refused and got
Yeah,
kicked out of society. I mean, Canada and New Zealand are pretty similar in the realms of censorship. We're seeing less
oh
of it in
yes,
Australia and the UK and the States, but Canada and New Zealand are particularly intense with media censorship, and we have not seen anything negative about the vaccine other than one story a few years ago where a lady was vaccine injured and still mandated. I mean, there's their public interest journalism fund that was set up during the COVID years that actually is still going until January of 2026. So there's a few months left. And I wonder, that's government funding of our mainstream media outlets over here. So I wonder what's going to happen next year when that funding backs off and perhaps there's a little less contractual obligation to sprout a specific lockstep narrative consistently year after year.
right.
We shall wait and see,
See
though.
no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil.
That's
Right.
exactly it. Yes. Yeah. So I have to ask though, even if there were no immediate adverse events to this contamination, particularly at the moment we're just looking at the SV40, what
Right.
are the issues surrounding the contamination though, even if there were people couldn't see it immediately?
Well, we have no idea of the long term effects of is it into our cells, and if so, where? We do know in the Yale study that some produce spikes 704 days post vax. And so I think that is only possible if some cells in your body somewhere are continually making spike, as this has been integrated into the genome of those cells. And so if so, where is it? We do know that seeing injured people continually make spike. So it's got to be there somewhere. If so, where? And at the same time, is it integrate into germline cells, sperms, and eggs? If so, it could have changed our own genomes on a global transgeneration. And so our DNA is changed, our kids are changed, their kids are changed, and once it's in, there's no way of getting things out. And so there's a current push on now to prove and see, is it actually integrated into some people's cells.
Well, we certainly look forward to hearing the results of that study. When will that be released?
We're working on things at this point, and we should hopefully know in the next 6 to 8 months. So
Very
I
serious.
I kind of I really hope that I don't find something,
Yeah.
but it needs to be looked at. Our governments aren't paying for it to be looked at because they don't want to know, right? So it's like, yes, there's DNA there, there's SVV40 there. These vaccines have caused harm, and yeah, it's very difficult to even show that these things are safe or effective.
Well, they certainly appear to be neither, especially if you need to keep having boosters all the time. I'd really like to go into the DNA doses within the Pfizer and Moderna jabs
Go for it.
because what was presented in your study was actually really astounding that the DNA contamination is meant to be what, a 10 nanograms limit.
It's
And yeah, and we're seeing 36 to 153 times higher than that limit, over the
Yeah.
limit, not just higher than it normally is, over the maximum amount that's allowed, and then 112 to 627 times higher than that for Moderna.
Mm-hmm.
And you're seeing adverse reactions, and we know that correlation doesn't equal causation, but let's just analyze this for a minute. The higher rates of adverse reactions are coming from the batches that have this higher contamination rate of DNA.
Well, few points first. Um,
Yes.
um, Limits in 1986 were 10 picograms per dose. It was changed in 1996 to 10 nanograms per dose, a factor of 1,000 difference, and and this is all for naked DNA less than 200 base pairs in length. So in 2003, DNA-based vaccines received privileged status, which allowed for much less strict guidelines. And Big Pharma said if people are given gene therapy, that they won't take it, except if it's disguised as a vaccine, and the whole term of unity was changed, then they go, oh, it's a so it's safe and it won't cause gene changes. At the same time, all of the DNA in these vials is inside lipid nanoparticles and being transfected right into our cells. It's not
Yeah.
naked DNA at all.
So that's where I found it most interesting, is that in your study it talked about how most DNA was inside the lipid nanoparticles, and that shielded it from
Yes.
breaking down, making it easier to slip into your cells.
Mm-hmm.
So they created a pathway for DNA alteration. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Do you think it was deliberate, or do you think it was an accident that happened with process 2?
Well, I think Pfizer's could have chose a pile of other plasmids, could have cleaned things up much better and didn't. And it's there on purpose. Is it a adjuvant? Is it to help make a response? Yeah. So it's probably there on purpose. I just can't say what that actual purpose is. And two, if we look at the total DNA with the tree, which will look at the total irrespective of the size, and in our work we used RNase A to wipe out all of the RNA in that sample. Pfizer is 154 times above the current limits, and Moderna is 128 times over. So, and then PCR wise, so you're looking at specific sequences there. Yes, Moderna is lower, and that's basically showing that Moderna's fragments are all short and broke up, except if you put a pile of 7 base pair, right, really short sequences into a cell. It's like a shotgun effect on that cell. and all of the and small DNA pieces can spontaneously integrate into our cells' genomes. So it's there. It's small, but it can cause effect. There's basically multiple ways these short things can cause harm. At the same time, with the Pfizer, you've got the SVV 40. Now, if you look at our paper, and the first four Pfizer vials had a much higher adverse events. Okay. Now, keep in mind theirs only looks at short-term serious and adverse events caused by the vaccine in the first month, two. Okay, and so it's all short-term health things. It's not long-term effects. And two, the four vials are purple-topped Pfizer vials, a PBS formulation. And so Moderna uses Tris. The first Pfizer lots were all PBS based, and so all of those have a much worse adverse events as the lipid nano particles will form big aggregates, and two, as soon as these things interact with blood, it will form a clot, and then that's how come the shots early on were called clot shots.
So we've got all this stuff entering into the nucleus. We've got the SV40, we've got the DNA, we've got lipid nanoparticles, making it a whole lot easier to enter in. And people have this in them now. So is there anything that they can do to either get it out or to help their body heal from any potential issues that may be arising now, a few years later?
Well, that's a very good in-depth thing. First of all, don't take any more boosters. That's like, no, don't take more. And two, if you're feeling fine, I would be thankful that you are not vaccine injured, and I would watch your heart. A study out there by Nakahara looked at vaxxed versus is scan and showed that all of those vaxxed had a inflamed overactive heart, and so
even without any symptoms,
they had no symptoms at all. They were asymptomatic people being screened for cancer. So all of those vaxxed had a black heart. All of those unvaxxed had a gray normal heart. And it's just like a lug nut on your car tire. If your nut is loose, you won't feel it, and you'll drive and you'll feel fine, and it'll drive good. And at some point, your wheel, if your nuts become loose enough, your tire will fall off. And so once it's off, there's no going back, right? And so if you're feeling fine, I would watch your heart. If you are feeling unwell, there's heaps of detox things out there that some people do, and it's because spike is toxic, LNPs are toxic, and we don't know if our cells are continually making spike. At the same time, we don't have a good test at this point in time to look for those of spike protein, and so unless a test is available, we can't know if our methods work or if we're just taking the detox things in hopes and having no effect. And I've found as well that every vaccine injured case is very unique, and they all say, well, I like this works best for me, and someone else does it, and it'll work or it won't, and so it's very much tailored to what they have. Now, is this a plug and play system? Yes. It's a brown the plasmid piece, and the spike will be cut out, changed, based on the viral variants, and so it's constantly changed. It's the same backbone. I've looked at vials in Australia, and they're just as bad as the ones here, if not worse. And in March, I looked at the brand new JN1s, and those were just as bad in loads of DNA and the SV4 as the XBB 1.5s and the ones before that. So it's
not getting any better. Their processes
it's a
are not
plug and play system, and it's
improving.
not getting any better at all. I have submitted this to 6 journals. First, when it was when our work came out first was on TT7 vials. We expanded it. We double checked all our methods. We used RNA to and it first to MDPI vaccines, assuming if it's good science done right, it will be at least sent out for peer review. We had 4 journals refused to even send it out. And it's because they are paid by big pharma to publish science that supports big pharma. And we came up to a bunch of that, and they're like, no, we're not sending this out. I even received a email of a editor who said he would send it out. I sent it to him, and it never even went out. He's like, nope, sorry, I'm not gonna touch this at all. If it's good science, let it be looked at, ripped apart, and analyzed. I sent it in February, April to Auto Unity, and they sent out things for peer review. We had 2 people come back and were very, very, very harsh comments, ripped things apart, which is fine. I basically answered them in a 22-page rebuttal, and the journal published it, and now it's been out for a month and a half, and the pub smear campaign is there ripping everything apart and doing their best to get this paper pulled. We've learned someone out there who's a pharma investor pays $5,000 if a paper like ours gets pulled.
And that's where we keep hearing, the greater the financial interest in a given study or area of research, the less likely the findings are to be true. So you've got corporate interests putting profits over people, and they are starving the truth out of existence in order to make money. And the unethical treatment of humanity is truly horrific and abhorrent.
Exactly. Very well said. And it's just, yeah, it's just horrific. And at first, the biggest hang up people had with the paper is that in the abstract for WHO, I had written World Health Authorization and not World Health Organization.
So it had
And
nothing to do with the science.
they have not given one scientific fact of why this paper is at fault. It's a typo here. It's a thing here. It's nothing to do with the science. And I've learned this whole thing is not about science. It's about pushing agenda and driving profits. And we know that the World Health is not well organized. It's a self-appointed authority, and therefore our slippage actually makes sense. So,
We're certainly up against it, aren't we? I mean, this is just, it's something that I guess it's been in play for a number of decades now,
yeah,
and people are just starting to become aware of things and to be able to stand up. But at some point, we have to understand that there's more of us than there are of them. And if we all use our collective voices to stand up and say no, then we can actually do something about this. And that is, if they use profits over people, then why don't we stop consuming their products?
exactly. As well as I say, it's essential to follow both the science and the silenced,
Yes.
because it's folk like us who are being silenced, and we have the scientific fact on our side.
Well, Dr. David Speicher, distinguished molecular virologist, that was a very profound point to end our discussion on today. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your profound knowledge and experience and also your wisdom. We really are honoured to have had you here, so thank you.
Thank you, Anna.
And we'll see you next time.
You will.